And the whole thrust of what we were doing was I was trying to construct a timeline from dawn to dusk. But the dawn to dusk was supposed to be, this was all in my head, probably slipped past the keeper for most people, but it's a cricket term, so never mind. But it was slipped past the catcher in your terms. So the idea was to have a day as an analogy for your life from birth to death. And you've both seen The Reef. And so then the construction of the film in editing was that. When we got back to Torquay, we buried ourselves for 3 weeks to edit the hour and a half. So we made the film in 3 weeks. Wow. And, it was just ridiculous. And it premiered. So we got back, I think, late May, edited through the last 3 weeks of June, and we premiered on about the 6th of July at the Sydney Opera House. And at the up in Darwin, rather, at the Darwin Concert Hall, and then did a tour down the west coast of Australia and then across to Sydney and Melbourne. And it was pretty successful, and so much so that I ended up in New York with a second redux of The Reef, which was 2 and 3 years later, I think, 2015.
Yeah,
and
which I think my son coughed all the way through. Don't you remember? He wouldn't not let me take him, and he was sick, and I was like, you're really sick, and he was like, no, I'm going. There's no way I'm not going, and so I took him, and I think he coughed the whole time. I think you and Sue were sitting right behind us. And I was mortified, but I was having an amazing time watching this thing. And then he'd be like, oh, that's good. Oh, that's
I saw it with Derek when he came through, and Richard. And that was like really cool. At the, where did they play it? At Carnegie Hall.
Oh, it wasn't Carnegie. No, it was, you would have seen it at the same place.
No, I saw it at Carnegie Hall. They came through again when Derek came through. And it was like at Carnegie Hall. It was crazy. I had to get full suit, tie, everything, tux on.
Oh,
remember that? It was during
great.
It Does Not Work.
It was amazing. Yeah, it was amazing. It was I didn't go to that one. I went to the other one, but even that, I think we dressed up and it was that beautiful theater. What was the theater?
92Y. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. So it's beautiful.
It's a great venue.
And it was just, it was really special. What a beautiful film.
Serious.
Well, yeah, it's interesting for me because I obviously, I look at it, I see only the faults. So it's really hard because it was one of these things that, again, you're gifted with the footage that we were able to get in the second. When we did the redux, we had some horrific, bad luck with swells and weather and trying to. Johnny did a mad run up a couple of months, or about a month and a half after we finished, to get more footage up at Red Bluff, which is that sequence with those guys in that hypnosis sequence. And so we were constantly just trying to improve it. And Richard was he was composing new pieces or he'd send me a scrap of music and then he'd go, what can we do with this? And then I'd go, right, okay. And that particular piece evolved out of hearing a little bit, and then I'd said, well, we can do this, and there's that little bit where he runs his hands across the face of the wave.
Yeah.
Can you do anything with that? And then he added this glissade, and then I said, okay, well, maybe we can extend that, and so we were back and forthing and ended up with quite a long, and so I love the piece because it grew into a really good piece of music, and it was a pleasure because I'm not a musician and I can obviously work with it, and being able to. Can I tell you a funny story?
Absolutely, please. This is the right place for
it. I actually started to compose a piece. I was trying to do it, and I was literally cutting bits of stuff up, notes and things, trying to get a feeling of something, and I cut this. I'd call it a piece of music, but I was trying to explain the feeling and pace of what I wanted more than anything, and I sent it up to Richard. And I think the stone cold silence that I got back was like, "Shut the fuck up, Mick! You don't go there with your music." It was anyway. But at the same time, we developed a fairly good rapport with understanding where we were going, and I'd say, look, I might send him a bit of 15th century church music and go, that feeling there, the way that there's a piece of music called Allegri's Miserere, and there's a soprano high C in there that was like the way the hair on the back of your neck stands up. I'd say, Rich, can we get something like that? Can we do something like that that's going to have a similar effect when that happens in the footage? And then there's other things like the last piece is Beethoven's it's the Cavatina, which was something that Beethoven was composing, and I've told you this story, but he was so affected by it that he started to cry, and the manuscript's got his tear stains on it, and he wanted that played at his funeral, and it's like so emotional that we were back and forth, cutting and recutting to go, can we get the same feeling in the pictures? And it was because there were things that Richard felt, I'd be constantly editing, or me and Johnny were constantly editing, trying to find that emotional range in the cut. And so in the end, we did it. And I think where I self-criticize is going, did I explain it well enough? Should I have explained the idea as, verbally, have a narrative? Because I was treating the whole reef as a long painting. It was a series of tableaus. And that whole thing of, if you get it, you get it. And if you don't, well, you enjoy the pictures type of thing. But I didn't want to have to spell it out. And so I think that's part of trying to do art, and I beat myself constantly over it. I can barely watch it, because I go, I know what I was trying to do, but did I really get there, And it's sort of, there were tensions, and even the fact that because I was producing it as well as writing it and directing it, and the production meant that at the same time I was dealing with legal and finances and spreadsheets, and at the same time, like up there, I was getting hammered by, make sure that they're doing this or that, or you can't do that shoot. We had a morning shoot where we had to have safety because we were going out at dawn. We're swimming about 800 metres out to a reef to do all that underwater stuff, and so there was me. I had a storyboard in gaffer tape on my fin, and Johnny and the two talent and a safety swimmer. And so there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us swimming out in the dark at Nalu.
That's the gnarliest thing I've ever heard. That's terrifying.
Actually, we're going out through these channels, and we're in the dark, and it's waiting for the sun to rise, and we know there's sharks around.
Yeah, there are.
And as the light's coming up, you can see them in the corners of your eyes. And, and I had a sort of a producer's assistant guy who was on the shore, who wasn't a surfer, and he was pacing around like back on the shore, and we did the shoot, and the sun came up and beautiful shots, and we all had our radar up for sharks, and then swam back in, and he goes, I would have drowned about 15 minutes into that, and you guys just cavorting out there. But it was awesome fun, and you sort of, because you're in a little group, you feel a little bit safer,
But Mick, I got a question for you about all that. I mean, there's a whole lot it goes into making a film. There's a whole lot that goes into any endeavor, but that's just a shit ton of stuff happening all at once. You're orchestrating it, you're creating it, you're collaborating on the creating it, you're managing egos and other creative people. You've got to bring it back, and you're trying to keep it straight in your head as far as what the storyboards are, whatever loosely, it's poetry, it's dance, it's like this weird kind of circus, factory also. It's filmmaking, but it's what prepared you for that? Like what allowed you to get into the mindset that would make you think I can do this? Like, what were you thinking? What do you draw upon when you're in that
look,
space?
it was basically I suck it and see. I really, it was just, I had the idea. I thought, well, if I stick to the simplicity of the arc of the day, and keep constantly having that in my mind, and then because you guys know me, and I'm a pretty sort of calm personality, and so I figured that it'll take a lot to ruffle me up there, and so if I just stick to my guns and just be me, I think I can do it, And I knew that I had great, Johnny's a fabulous shooter and he's a great brain, and we're very, very close friends, and we bounced off each other a lot. And when we were doing the editing together, like Johnny has a very instinctive way of editing, and I have a much more, like, because of my advertising background, a story-based style. So what I'd be doing, like, and I probably cut 60% of it and Johnny 40, and he'd do cuts, but he's a very poetic, and Johnny, and if you know him, you sort of, that's a thing.
One of the principal photographers of Litmus, by the way, right? Like, so gotta give.
But and he'd do a cut and he'd send it to me, and I'd go, oh, mate, it's so beautiful, but you got to remember it's at this time of day, so you can't have that time of day in that part of it, and this is what I'm trying to say here. And so as long as I maintain the strength to say it's not completely random, but otherwise stick to that, and then you can do what you like. It was those kind of things, and there were times up there when there'd be random people throwing ideas in, and I'd be being, say, pressured, well, what about that idea and what about that idea? And I'd go, no, we've got to stick to the whole, I've got to be the director here and just stay strong. And it was hard at times because there were sometimes good ideas, but they didn't fit within the arc of this day that was your life. And so, again, I was trying to get that in. And the other thing too was just new pieces of music. And I think probably my greatest failing in it was trying to accommodate everything instead of make it a little bit shorter and make it a bit tighter. And things evolved after the fact, and we actually did bring in a stager, a guy called Nigel Jamieson, who in probably the last couple of performances, the Reef actually did some things like bringing the screen down behind the orchestra as opposed to above the orchestra, and that brought them into the way it was staged. And these were things that I was probably adamant in my naivety to have the screen above, that the orchestra was the music and the film was the film, and you watch the film and listen. But we discovered, particularly actually at the performance at 92Y, where just by dint of logistics, the orchestra was in front of the screen. I went, wow, that actually really works, because they were,
that was beautiful.
And that was probably for me the best performance of them all. That one at 92Y, there was an intimacy about it, and that informed later ones that went to the Barbican. The London performance apparently was fantastic. So that was the Reef, and I was at the end of all of that, I was pretty exhausted with the whole thing, and went back into, well, actually, I'll step aside. In between the two Reefs, I did Great Ocean Quarterly, 7 issues of Great Ocean Quarterly, because
there we go.
and that was an idea. Do I talk about Great Ocean Quarterly, or I suppose there it is?
I've got the latest one here. I mean, it's like well thumbed through. It's got like coffee stains and
good
watermarks.
Coffee stains, Toddy. How dare you?
Hey, he could have brought it into the bathroom, right?
Yeah, exactly. Where mine is, or one.
Different kinds of sayings,
yeah, exactly.
I think.
And I'd had the idea for Great Ocean Quarterly back in probably 2000, and not long around the time I was doing Musica, I was starting to fiddle around with the thought, and I showed it to a